Welcome back, computer graphics students. This is part 2 of Offset Path, and I haven't really demoed anything yet, but I'm going to do that right now. But we are going to work on this California Sharks logo and more in specifically the text. And I'm just going to go over a couple steps with text, and then I'm going to do the offset path process for the straight text. And that's all I'll do in this demo. And then I'll do one more demo where I'll work with the arch text. So I'm going to get started right now just to show you a couple things with text in Illustrator. I have to use the text tool in Illustrator, the T tool. And also another thing that I'll use when I work with the text tool in Illustrator, if I don't have it out, would be the character palette. And I'm going to go Window, up top, Window, Type, Character, and I'm going to bring out my character palette. The reason I like to use that is because it will show me text in the actual font when I sort through the menu, as opposed to when I use the text up here. I get a menu of fonts, but I don't get what the text looks like. So it helps a little bit if you use this character palette. So what I'm going to first show you is what not to do, and then I'll show you what to do. What you do not want to do with your text is click and drag a box. And you might do that when you were using InDesign, a page layout program, and you could start typing in here, and I'll just type Sharks. Okay, now the problem with this is that this box is meant to be a container for body copy. It's not meant to be text that we can move around. And I mean, you can move this around, but you can see if you scale this box, it's not going to scale the text. You'd have to highlight the text. And that would be fine for body copy, paragraph copy, if you're doing like a newsletter page or doing an ad or something like that. So we don't want to click and drag with the text tool. So that's not something we want to do right now. So I'm going to delete that. And what you do want to do is you just want to click once on your page. So I'm going to click once. Click. There it is. I have a blinking cursor, and I'm just going to type Sharks. Now it's real small right now, but I'm going to take my arrow tool, my selection tool, and I'm going to scale this up. And you can see that it has a bounding box. And if I hold a shift and grab the corner, I can make this Sharks real big. Now this isn't the font that I want to use, so I'll go over here to my character palette. I'm going to use something from the slab serif category, or actually for this sample here I used Machine, and hopefully I have it running here. And here it is, ITC Machine, and I'll use bold, and you can see that font will actually come out in all caps. And it doesn't have serifs on it, but it has kind of angled corners on it, which make it kind of a collegiate, athletic looking kind of font. And it's nice and bold, and it's also condensed, so it's very narrow. What I'm going to do with this font, now that I typed it, and remember, I could stretch it, I could do anything I want with it, and I'll undo that because I don't want to. But what I can do with this font right now is I'm going to actually convert it to outlines. Now what that does, and you have to be careful about doing this, is it makes it no longer a font. That means if I spelled Sharks wrong, or if I wanted to change the font, I can no longer do it after I create outlines, because outlines is going to make it into a path. But for what we're doing here with California Sharks, this is what we want to do. So if you ever want to, kind of make a copy of it, I'll do an option drag and put the text over here. Then you'll have editable text that you can work with. But for right now, I'm going to do this process by converting this text to outline. So I'll go through that process. So remember on that PDF you have, step 1 was create the text. So you click once, create the text, and certainly put it in the font and the size that you want. You could scale this as big as small as you want while we're working with this. Second step is going to be creating outlines. So I'm going to go to do this. You want to use your arrow. You don't want to highlight. You don't have to highlight to do this, because if you go to type create outlines, where we're going to go, you can see that it's grayed out. So you're not going to use your text tool to do this. You are going to use your arrow tool and select this whole kind of text box that you have, or this element, and we're going to go to the type menu, and we're going to go type create outlines. And when you do that, you can see the difference now. It actually has anchor points on it, and each letter is separate. Now what happens when Illustrator does this initially, it actually groups all the letters together. That's why we could click on one letter and all the letters are selected. So if I double click on this, I actually go in that group editing mode, where I can actually change one letter and go back. So up here, if you see that layer 1 and group, I'm actually within a group editing the individual letters. If I want to get out of this, just double click outside of it, and it'll bring me back to my regular area. Okay, now for offset path technique, I don't want to edit the group. I don't want to do this to a group. I want to take one step further and actually make it a compound path. Now a compound path is the thing that we actually do to sometimes take two circles and make make them into one path so that one knocks out the other. But in this case, the compound path will just kind of keep we'll kind of treat all the paths as one path, and when it makes a path outside of these, it'll make one path rather than individual letters. So we don't want individual paths around each letter, which we then have to ungroup and try to select again. It just is very difficult. So I'm not going to explain too much, just do this, okay? Make this a compound path after you make it outlines. So you made it outlines, now you're going to go Object, Compound Path, Make, and it may not look any different. Sometimes it strips out the color. I'm not even sure why it strips out the color, but it does sometimes. So I'm going to just make it blue. And I think that's the blue I was using. So, you know, nothing different. It doesn't look any different, but a compound path will help it when we do the next step. And the next step is going to be offset path. So I'm going to go Object, Path, Offset path. And notice there is something called outline stroke, which sounds similar, but we're not. We're going to use offset path. So I'm going to do offset path, and I'll move this aside, and I can hit preview. I can see right now it's making a path outside of my original lettering, and that's kind of a lot. 0.13 is over 1/8 of an inch, so depending on how big of an object you're working with on the stage or on your sheet, you may want to make that a little less. So I'm going to make it a little less, of like 0.10, which is less than 1/8 of an inch. So you have to kind of know your decimal conversions a little bit in terms of inches here. So I'm going to preview that. I could turn preview on or off to see what it's going to look like, and you can see it's going to make it the same color as the fill. I'll hit OK, and you can see now that I have an outer path. If I click on the edge, I can see the outer path. If I click on the inner path, there's my inner path. So if I just did something as simple as making the inside white, you can see that has a nice effect. And that would look nice on some kind of darker background or some kind of gray background. Has a nice effect, but I could even take this one step further, click the outer path, and go Object, Path, Offset Path, and now I could keep doing it. I don't have to do compound path again. Once it's made a compound path, that's fine, so I don't have to do it anymore. Now I could just keep making compound paths. I'll make one more, and you could change the distance or keep it the same distance. I'll leave it the same. And now this one, I'm not sure what I want to do with color here. I could do I could do one in the inside, which is black. I could do one on the outside, which is yellow. I could do any kind of combinations here. I could do one on the inside, which is blue, since we're using that blue color. Maybe I'll do it blue since it looks a little bit different than what we're doing over there. And then if I needed something, if this was going on some kind of yellow shirt or something, I wouldn't want to have a yellow backing. I might do one more. So I'll do Object, Path, Offset Path, and I'll do one more. And this last one I'll fill with black. Okay. Now, and you can see the further we get away, the less it's tracing the shape of those letters. So it's starting to lose the effect a little bit. So I'm actually going to delete that last one. And I'm going to do it, maybe I'll go back and do it similar to the one I have here, where the most outer path is black. The inner path, the next one, you have to be careful which one you click on. The next one is going to be yellow. And my inner one is going to be blue. And to create a little more contrast, or to make that blue really pop, I could do two things. I could put a little white stroke on this, or I could click on this and do one little more offset path. And maybe I'll do that. I'll go Offset Path. And remember, there are steps. Object, Path, Offset Path. And I'll do it maybe half the distance. Instead of 0.1, I'll do 0.05, which would be half the distance of that. I could preview it, and you can see that it's a little bit smaller. And I'll hit OK. And now that last path I just made, click on the outside of that, I'll fill that with white. And now I get that little bit of white outline around it that creates a little more contrast between the yellow and the blue. It heightens things a little bit. So I'm going to move that down here. And then what we're going to do next is actually do the California part. So that was the straight text. And remember the steps again, and it's on our sheet. Actually, I'll just click back here and show you this. And zoom into this part right here. The next step is, or the steps that we did for straight text was we type it with a text tool. We create outlines. We make it a compound path, which sometimes takes the color away. You just have to put the color back, and you won't see a difference. And then the last step is going Object, Path, Offset Path, and that's where you could put those multiple. You could put as many as you want. You could keep making offset paths. You could go, out as much as you want. You could use negative numbers and go in. But what it does is it creates, and I'll zoom into this here and show you an outline again. You can see it just makes multiple paths. So we're going to stop here. I'll put it back into preview mode. We'll stop here, and I'll go over the arc text effect and the steps for that because it's a little bit different.